There's a secret that has never been told, not for lack of questions, but by choice. In this video, we're going to crack open the silence of the McCanns, and maybe you'll realize that what hasn't been confessed speaks louder than everything that has been said. Get ready to face the vault where this dangerous truth might be hidden. Picture a dusty vault, forgotten in the back of a dark room. Nothing in it moves, but you feel the weight of the secret it holds. Every passing second makes the silence feel heavier. Now transfer that feeling to a family that became a global symbol of tragedy, and you realize the weight of what was never said. In the first press conference, the official statement seemed crystal clear, but there was something behind the tired faces. Glances that darted away, pauses that lingered too long, questions sidestepped with rehearsed phrases, a silence that speaks, as if the vault were there, not to protect, but to conceal. And here's something that might surprise you. It wasn't a lie that sparked distrust. It was the absence of simple fragments, answers to obvious questions that never came. Nothing screamed guilt, but the echo of what was omitted keeps reverberating. I bet you've seen this ritual before. A heartfelt social post, a personal brand, global solidarity. Everything so perfectly stitched together until someone notices the zipper undone. A tiny slip, and the narrative's seams start to show flaws. What if what's being guarded too tightly isn't just pain, but a truth too heavy to be spoken out loud? This silence isn't just absence. It's a calculated gesture, felt by those trying to fill in the gaps. And we're not just talking about tough questions, but decisions, memories, even stifled laughs in moments that should have been light. A laugh cut short, a glance that flees, and the weight grows in a way that you feel in your chest, even without knowing why. For the community, the impact was immediate. Trust shattered into 1,000 invisible pieces. They're small sensations, like the smell of an empty house, the echo of footsteps with no reply, but they leave the impression that part of the story was always shaped out of our sight. I won't give you easy answers, but I'll show you why nothing hits harder than a calculated silence. And to understand what's locked in that vault, you have to look beyond what was officially released. If this piqued your interest, stay with me. This journey changes the perspective of those who thought they already knew everything. Sir, lightly. If you feel, like I do, that the story began before what they told us, let's open that door together. When silence becomes a latch, it wasn't sudden. Their silence didn't fall from the sky or emerge with their daughter's disappearance. It was built, piece by piece, like someone closing doors from the inside. In the first interviews, something stood out, and it wasn't what they said. It was what they didn't say. The pauses that were too long, the eyes that slipped away when the topic got tough, those questions that seemed simple, but never got a straight answer. You know what I'm talking about. Because even those who try to ignore it feel it, that sense that something's out of place, and it's not in the story itself, it's in the tone, in the way they dance around the subject, never quite touching it. An example? The 48 questions Kate McCann was asked by the police and refused to answer. 48, not one or two. Almost an entire interview blocked completely. Basic, direct questions. Where was she? What did she see? What did she hear? No answers, just silence. The justification? Trauma, emotional difficulty. But that raises another question. When does trauma turn into a shield? Because it wasn't just that. Soon after the disappearance, the family hired a spokesperson, then lawyers, then image management experts. In no time, everything around them seemed filtered, scripted, armored. The pain was real, but it started to feel rehearsed. And that's when the tone shifts. Because if silence stems from pain, it's understandable. But when silence is maintained by strategy, it becomes a latch, one that no one can open, not the police, not the press, not the public. And the most unsettling part, behind every answer that didn't come, there seemed to be a choice. Armor, silence, and the questions no one dared to ask. From this point on, silence stops being just absence. It becomes presence. The presence of something guarded, protected. The presence of a truth that cannot be spoken. You notice it in the gestures, in the controlled press conferences, in the absence of contradictions, Because when everything seems too perfect, something's hidden. And what's hidden isn't necessarily guilt, but it's something that doesn't fit with caution. Some mention group habits, like how the children were left alone in their rooms during dinners. It was common, they said, but when the police asked for exact timelines, the accounts shifted slightly. 5 minutes more here, a forgotten detail there. Is it small? Maybe, but when it repeats, it becomes a pattern. And in that pattern lies what's most unsettling: the repetition of the unsaid. No talk of internal arguments, no talk of David Payne's visit to the room, no talk of the sniffer dogs. The press tried, but was silenced, or discredited, or simply ignored. Little by little, an emotional vault formed around the family. No one could touch it. Questioning became a lack of compassion, and the public swallowed it. But the question that echoes is, who built this vault? Because it didn't rise on its own. It was created, protected, reinforced. Not by those who lost, but by those who needed to keep something locked away. It could be fear, it could be shame, it could be guilt. We can't know. But what we can feel is that the key was never lost. It was hidden. And now, years later, the vault is still there, locked, holding not just what was forgotten, but perhaps what could never be revealed. And here's where everything shifts. But when pain becomes a shield, it can also become a latch. And if the latch is still there, what exactly is it trying to protect? This isn't an answer, it's a crack. And it leads us straight to the heart of the next piece. When silence stops protecting and starts controlling. When absence becomes control. The first crack came in a carelessly spoken phrase, or maybe said in haste. It was during an interview, months after the disappearance. Jerry McCanns said something about the moment he entered the room and saw that Madeline had gone. That was it. But what do you mean, had gone? It wasn't the phrase you'd expect from a desperate father. It wasn't the pain you'd imagine pouring out. It was almost technical, almost rehearsed. And it's in that coldness that silence starts to change form, from lament to calculation. The timeline of events, which seems solid in the first interviews, begins to crumble when placed side by side with the friends' statements. The times don't match. Witnesses get confused, and there's an uncomfortable silence around one figure in particular, David Payne. According to a note in the case files, he was reportedly the last adult outside the family to see Madeline alive. He had gone to the apartment late in the afternoon, but the exact version of what he saw, what he did, changes depending on who's telling the story. One says he stayed for 5 minutes, another, 15. Jerry doesn't mention it. Kate stays silent. Why was this moment, which could be crucial, never explored in depth? This is the kind of silence that no longer sounds like trauma. It's a silence that feels convenient. Meanwhile, the British press treated the couple as martyrs. An entire country was guided to see them as sacred, untouchable victims. With every suspicion, a new emotional headline polished their public image. Devastated parents, unending pain, grief without closure. But between one headline and another, documents started disappearing from the Portuguese Judicial Police's website. Reports that were once public were archived, removed without warning. And at the same time, the McCanns secured court rulings to censor books and statements, even from former investigators. This isn't just silence. It's curation of silence. This is where pain becomes a latch, and the latch becomes a key. The key was never lost. It was hidden. If you stop to think, it was never about what they said. It was about what they managed to keep from being said. Kate McCann didn't answer the 48 questions, but no one, not the press, not the courts, not the public, made a scandal out of it. Her silence was accepted as something to be respected, as if expecting any answer was an aggression. But what if that silence was more strategic than vulnerable? There's a term for this, to keep quiet. Silence management. So the world only hears what you want. It's not omission out of pain, it's control for convenience. And that's how silence turns into a narrative. If Kate had answered each of those questions, maybe there wouldn't have been major revelations. Maybe she'd say she didn't remember, that she was in shock. But the act of not answering was more powerful than any words. She chose emptiness. And in this case, emptiness filled everything. Now, Imagine that multiplied over months, over years, through official statements, press releases, lawsuits, every piece carefully placed so nothing slipped out. No gesture out of place. No visible every time someone tried to raise a doubt, they were immediately accused of cruelty. How dare you question those who are suffering? Well, that was the reaction. And maybe that's exactly what kept everything standing. Because when pain becomes a shield, the shield becomes a latch. And we, thinking we're being human, end up keeping the vault locked. It's strange, isn't it? How certain truths only hurt when they fall into silence. Because when everything is said, at least we know what to do with it. But when nothing is said, when everything is avoided, what's left? A suffocating feeling that the truth didn't disappear with Madeline. It's still here, somewhere inside the vault. And there are things we only understand when we feel the cold of the key in our palm, the cost of never opening the vault. Let's get to the facts. When Kate McCann refused to answer 48 police questions, direct, no-nonsense questions that could have clarified basic contradictions, it wasn't a gesture of despair. It was a conscious decision. She was accompanied by lawyers. She was aware of the repercussions, and still, she didn't speak. At the time, the justification was clear: legal advice. But that raises a simple question. If you're dealing with your daughter's disappearance, why the fear of answering such crucial questions? Why the reluctance to say where you were, what you saw, what you heard? That choice of silence didn't erase doubts. It fueled them even more. And then came the barriers. The legal team grew. Spokespeople were appointed. Interviews became scripted. Pain was placed at the center. The public narrative solidified. They were untouchable victims. And from that moment on, questioning became almost a moral transgression. But what if that's exactly where the problem lies? Because when the vault was sealed with such care, by media professionals, contracts, social conventions, what it came to hold wasn't just pain. It was also control. Control over what can be said. Control over what can be asked. Control over how far the truth can go before it becomes too uncomfortable. And that protection became the standard. It wasn't just the British media that bowed down. The police, at various points, also yielded to political pressure. The investigation was halted, reopened, redirected, always orbiting the same doubt. Why did no one dare to unlock what needed to be unlocked? And there's the key. The McCanns' silence was never absolute. It was selective. They spoke when they wanted, in books, international interviews, documentaries, but always on their own terms, always within their own framing. Meanwhile, simple questions, like why the sniffer dog detected a human scent in the trunk of the rental car 3 weeks after the disappearance, never got a firm answer. The traces are in the records. The contradictions are in the police reports. The changing versions are documented. But even so, there was never a confession. Not even an attempt to reconcile with legitimate doubts. Just silence. And now, looking back at this path, what we see is a kind of strategic armor. We're not saying they committed a crime, but it's undeniable that they created an environment where the full truth was no longer accessible, where everything became a legal risk, where even questions became a threat. This is where the symbol becomes fact. The vault wasn't just a metaphor, it was a real structure, built brick by brick with counsel, caution, and time. Its exact contents, we don't know. But we know enough to say there was something inside that they never wanted fully exposed. Maybe because that truth, in its raw, unedited form, wouldn't withstand the collective gaze. Maybe because the decision to leave the children alone in the apartment while dining, and to repeat that practice more than once, would bring too many consequences if faced coldly, without the filter of compassion. Maybe because there were failures in the first hour, and correcting those failures after so many years would mean admitting a guilt now hidden under layers of silence. And here's the resolution no one expected. The vault will never fully open, but that doesn't mean it can't be confronted. That's what this video did. With every question you may never have heard, with every point overlooked by the major newspapers, with every piece of evidence treated as an irrelevant detail, but that never should have been. This is the final delivery. It's not the full truth. It's the recognition that their silence isn't neutral. It's shaped, it's maintained, and it has a cost. Because as long as we don't open this kind of vault, others get locked, and other silences, even worse ones, become the norm. It's not about attacking. It's about remembering that every poorly told story has consequences, even if the words are never spoken, even if what hurts is exactly intact, guarded. But after all this, the hardest part isn't knowing. It's pretending you don't. There's a kind of silence that doesn't soothe, that isn't respect or care. It's a silence that weighs heavy, that seems to hide something. And instead of comforting, it only leaves questions hanging. At this point in the story, you've already realized that the silence around the McCann case was never neutral. And maybe it wasn't even out of fear or pain. Maybe it was a choice. It's hard to accept that. It hurts to think that the same pain that moves us might also be serving as a barrier, that grief turned into a latch, and that, while the world was moved, some answers stayed locked in a place no one could or wanted to reach. And here, between empathy and omission, we're left with a dilemma no one likes to face. Does respecting too much sometimes mean allowing too much? That's the path we walked in this video. Every silence pointed out wasn't just an absence of answers. It was the presence of something denser, a shadow, a trace, a movement. And when you look at the details, at what was avoided, the questions ignored, the documents shielded, you can't pretend anymore that it was all just chance or carelessness. The absence repeats, the silence repeats, and those who repeat choose. I'll tell you honestly, I didn't want to think about this when I started, because no one wants to meddle in others' pain. No one wants to seem cruel in the face of a family that lost a child. But there came a moment when I stopped looking at that pain and started hearing the sound coming from it. And that sound was too calculated, too sealed, too sterile. The truth is, not all silence is respect. Sometimes it's defense, sometimes it's strategy. And that's what we saw. An entire structure built around that silence. Lawyers, spokespeople, contracts, the media always treading lightly, an entire country avoiding the most direct questions. And if all this was just to protect those who suffered, why the discomfort in answering? Why refuse 48 times? Why block access to files that could clarify what happened? This is where my opinion takes shape. And it's clear we can't treat silence as a synonym for innocence. Silence is just silence. And when it comes with layers of armor, we have a duty to ask, not to punish, but to understand, to prevent silence from becoming the rule. Because when pain becomes a shield, the truth vanishes. And here's where I face you with what might be the most uncomfortable point of this whole story. By protecting that silence, didn't we become complicit in it? Did we, out of fear of seeming insensitive, help build a narrative with no room for the truth? These questions don't have easy answers, but they need to be asked. And if you've made it this far, I know you felt that discomfort too. That shiver of someone who realized something's out of place, but no one wants to point it out. Now I want you to carry this with you. The search for answers isn't disrespect. It's justice. It's what every poorly told story deserves, and every missing child needs. If this stirred something in you, I invite you to keep going. The next video will dive even deeper, but not into the case. It'll dive into us, into how we build selective empathy, into how we, as a society, learn to protect what moves us, even when it confuses us. If you want to keep feeling together and questioning responsibly, I'll be waiting for you in the next chapter. Because there are things we only notice when we stop looking with pity and start looking with clarity. And if you want to walk with me through this difficult terrain, where not everything is beautiful, but everything needs to be said, subscribe. It's not about numbers, it's about belonging. Here, those who subscribe are saying, I want the key too. And now, I want to know what this left in you. It might be anger, it might be compassion, it might be doubt. Write it in the comments, but write it for real. A sentence, a thought, a discomfort. I'll read every single one. If you made it this far and felt like you were hearing something no one else dares to say, write this. It's our way of saying you saw the crack, that you didn't look away. And if you want to turn this moment into something bigger, the super chat is there. Not as financial support, but as a signal. Those who send a super chat here aren't just saying thank you, they're saying keep going. They're saying, I also believe these stories need to be told even when they hurt. Because there are stories the world tries to erase, and there are silences that only break when someone decides to listen. Maybe the vault will never fully open. Maybe we'll never have all the answers. But now we know where it is. We saw the crack, and once you see it, there's no unseeing it. Just by seeing the crack, not everyone will want. You're already not the same. Not all silence is forgetting. And if it hurt, it's because it still matters.